saying I've wanted to kill my mother since I was 8 years old, and I'm not proud of that. And then a month later, I'm up living with my grandparents in the mountains, and 10 months later, I murdered them. It made it worse to be on top of a mountain. I was literally on top of a mountain when it happened. And I sensed everybody in the world just stopping what they were doing, turning around, saw what I did, and are coming to get me.
Edmund Emil Kemper III murdered 10 people, including his grandparents, his mother, and several young women. Born in Burbank, California, Kemper was very intelligent with an IQ of 136, but exhibited sociopathic behavior from a young age. He tortured and killed animals, performed sexual rituals with dolls, and threatened to kill a teacher he had a crush on. His mother, Clarnell, suffered from borderline personality disorder, leading to her rage and abuse against her son. On August 27, 1964, Kemper shot his grandmother while she was preparing a children's book. When his grandfather returned home, Kemper shot him as well. He called his mother, who told him to contact the police. When questioned, Kemper said he killed his grandmother to experience killing and shot his grandfather because he knew his grandfather would be upset about the first murder. Kemper was briefly diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia by court psychiatrists and sentenced to the Atascadero State Hospital as a criminally insane juvenile. He surprisingly got along well with his psychiatrist and was even made his assistant. On December 18, 1969, on his 21st birthday, Kemper was released against the wishes of several psychologists and placed in the care of his mother in Santa Cruz. Kemper worked in various jobs before securing work with the California Department of Public Works, Division of Highways in District 4. He befriended several local police officers and even planned to become one himself, a dream that ended when he learned that he was above regulation height. He was then 2.05 meters and weighed 140 kilograms. By 1972, Kemper had turned to a life of violence yet again. On May 7th, he picked up 2 Fresno State students, 18-year-old Mary Ann Pess and 18-year-old Anita Lucchesa, near Berkeley, California. Kemper took the women to a nearby forested area with the intent of raping them, but he panicked and stabbed and choked the 2 women to death. He then loaded them into his trunk and proceeded to his Alameda home. A cop stopped him on the way for a broken taillight, but did not search the car. He would have discovered the bodies of Ed Kemper's victims inside if he had. Kemper's roommate was not at home, so he brought the bodies inside his apartment and photographed and sexually interacted with the naked corpses before dismembering them. He then placed the body parts in plastic bags and dumped them near Loma Prieta Mountain. Kemper engaged in iramatio, or had oral sex with both Pess and Lucchesa before disposing of their severed heads in a ravine. On the evening of September 14, 1972, Kemper picked up a 15-year-old dance student named Aiko Ku, who had decided to hitchhike to a dance class after missing her bus. He went to an isolated location again, this time pulling a gun on Ku before mistakenly locking himself out of his car, but was able to persuade the young teenage girl to allow him back in. He then choked her to death, raped her, and murdered her. Back at his apartment, he had sexual intercourse with the corpse before dismembering and disposing of the remains in the same manner as his previous 2 victims. Kemper remembered staring down at his newest victim with pride after dumping Ku's body in his trunk. He stated he admired his catch like a fisherman. On January 7, 1973, Kemper, who had moved back in with his mother, was driving around the Cabrillo College campus when he picked up 18-year-old student Cynthia Ann Cindy Schall. He drove to a wooded spot and shot her to death with a .22 caliber pistol. He then put her body in a closet in his room and drove to his mother's house. When his mother departed for work the next morning, he had sexual intercourse with Schall's corpse, extracted the bullet, then dismembered and decapitated her in his mother's bathtub. Kemper kept Schall's severed head for several days, participating in iramatio with it on a regular basis before burying it in his mother's garden, facing upward toward her bedroom. He explained after his imprisonment that he did this because his mother always wanted people to look up to her. He disposed of the remainder of Schall's remains by tossing them off a cliff. On February 5, 1973, after a heated argument with his mother, Kemper left his house in search of possible victims. On the UCSC campus, he encountered Rosalind Heather Thorpe, 23, and Alice Helen Allison Liu, 20. According to Kemper, Thorpe got into his car first, encouraging Liu to follow. He fatally shot Thorpe and Liu with his revolver before wrapping their bodies in blankets. Kemper returned to his mother's house yet again, this time beheading them in his car and carrying the headless corpses inside his mother's house to have sexual relations with them. He disassembled the victims, removed the bullets to prevent identification, and disposed of their remains the following morning. On April 20th, 1973, allegedly 3 weeks after becoming engaged, Kemper was coming home from a party, and 52-year-old Clarnell Strandberg was awakened by her son's arrival. She observed Kemper enter her room while sitting in her bed reading a book and said to him, "I suppose you're going to want to sit up all night and talk now." "No," Kemper responded. "Good night." He then waited till she fell asleep before sneaking back into her room to smash her with a claw hammer and slice her throat with a penknife. Kemper then decapitated her and humiliated her body. Kemper stated that he put her head on a shelf and screamed at it for an hour, threw darts at it, and ultimately smashed her face in. He also cut out her tongue and larynx and put them in the garbage disposal. However, the garbage disposal could not break down the tough vocal cords and ejected the tissue back into the sink. That seemed appropriate, as much as she bitched and screamed and yelled at me over so many years, Kemper later said.
I knew a week before she died I was going to kill her. And she went out to a party, she got soused, she came home, went to sleep. I was woken up by that, came out. I walked up to her bed. She's laying there reading a paperback. As many thousands of nights before. And she said, "Oh, I suppose you're going to want to sit up all night and talk now." Shit. I looked at her, I said, "No." I said, "Good night." And I knew I was going to kill her, you know? And I was so cold, it's so hard. And that's the first time in 10 years I've looked at it that way. I mean, that intensely, that honestly. It hurts.
Kemper concealed his mother's body in a closet and went to a local tavern to drink. When he returned, he asked his mother's best friend, 59-year-old Sarah Taylor Sally Hallett, over for dinner and a movie. When Hallett came, Kemper strangled her to death in order to fabricate the story that his mother and Hallett had gone on vacation together. He then hid Hallett's body in a closet, covered up any visible traces of a disturbance, and left a message for the cops. It said, approximately 5:15 a.m. Saturday. No need for her to suffer any more at the hands of this horrible, murderous butcher. It was quick, asleep, the way I wanted it. Not sloppy and incomplete, gents, just a lack of time. I got things to do. Kemper was indicted on 8 counts of first-degree murder on May 7, 1973. Due to Kemper's explicit and detailed confession, his counsel's only option was to plead not guilty by reason of insanity to the charges. Kemper twice tried to commit suicide in custody. On November 8, 1973, the 6-man, 6-woman jury deliberated for 5 hours before declaring Kemper sane and guilty on all counts. He asked for the death penalty, requesting death by torture. However, capital punishment was suspended in California at the time, and he instead received 8 concurrent life sentences.